How about that, you poor thing? I've eliminated the smell of poverty for you, so you should be grateful." With those words, champagne splashed forcefully across my face. This happened when I went to greet my fiancé's family. Instead of showing concern, Harry, my fiancé, laughed loudly, mocking me. In that moment, I realized my carefully styled hair and meticulously chosen outfit had all been for nothing. I felt empty. "I will be terminating our contract with your company," I said firmly. Grace, Harry's mother, who had thrown the champagne, and Harry himself looked at me in utter shock, unable to comprehend what had just happened. Suddenly, Harry's father, President Smith, appeared. "Mr. Smith, you mentioned planning to retire soon and passing your responsibilities to your son. Given the circumstances, it's only reasonable to reconsider how much my company can trust a future leader like him. It seems your intention was to maintain our business relationship through this marriage, but that has backfired." After calmly explaining everything, I left the scene. Grace, overhearing my conversation with President Smith, remained too stunned to speak. This wasn't the end, though. They would have to face the consequences of their actions. "My name is Maya Scott. I'm 48 years old and have never married. I've always prioritized my career and cherished my alone time. My hobbies, reading and watching movies, have filled my days with fulfillment, which is why I never felt a need for marriage. However, this past April, when spring was in full bloom, an unexpected marriage proposal came my way. The introduction came from Douglas Smith, with whom I had a long-standing business relationship. "Ms. Scott, I would love to introduce you to someone," he said. At first, I hesitated but eventually agreed. That person was Harry, the youngest son of President Smith. He had several older sisters and had been close to marriage a few times but was still unmarried. I made one request when we met, which he agreed to. Harry was polite and kind, and I quickly grew fond of him. I even started to believe that marrying him might be a good idea. When I suggested we date, both President Smith and Harry were pleased, and everything went smoothly until an unexpected situation unfolded. 5 weeks into our relationship, on our third date, Harry smiled and said, "We're already like a couple, aren't we?" He wore a casual jacket and seemed relaxed, quite different from his usual polished self. I, too, had opted for a more casual look this time. Even though we were both older, the feeling between us was fresh, like young love. But as the date went on, I began to feel something off about Harry's behavior. He often made condescending remarks. For instance, at an upscale restaurant, he proudly said, "You wouldn't normally get to come to a place like this, right? It must be unusual for you." I could only respond with an ambiguous smile to his words. In fact, this restaurant is one of my favorites, and I had just visited it with a friend 3 days ago. However, it would have been cruel to embarrass him on the spot, so I didn't tell him the truth. A waiter I knew nodded at my signal and pretended to be ignorant. While sitting, I noticed the watch on Harry's wrist. It wasn't a top-of-the-line item, but it was decent. "That's a different watch from before. The color is lovely, and it suits you," I complimented. Embarrassed, Harry took off the watch to show it to me, mistaking my interest. He seemed to offer it out of kindness. Since I wasn't deeply interested, I briefly checked it and returned it, but he insisted on giving it again. "Feel free to take a closer look. It's not often you see something this high-end, right? No need to be shy," he said. My reaction wasn't so much out of politeness as it was just a lack of interest in men's watches. Though I agreed to take it when he insisted, I felt a bit perplexed. To me, a watch is just an accessory, and I think checking the time on a smartphone is sufficient. I mentioned his watch casually, just as I might compliment a friend's new decorative item. Many of the older people I work with wear them too, so I actually see them quite often. "Thank you for showing it to me. It's nice to have something you like," I said. At that, Harry slightly pouted and surreptitiously followed my belongings with his gaze. What caught his interest was a bag that I am particularly fond of. This bag was specially made for me at a favorite workshop, reflecting the craftsman's skill and my taste, and it's very practical. It's a bit pricey, but it seemed cheap to Harry. I was wondering, don't you have a proper bag instead? I think you should have something more prestigious, he said. The bag was custom made at an Italian workshop and naturally doesn't have a brand logo. In fact, the Craftsman's Workshop logo is branded on the bottom of the bag. However, I prefer simple designs above all, so I asked to have the logo hidden. It would be difficult for someone not accustomed to women's bags to judge its price just by looking, but I couldn't help but be puzzled by his consistently superior tone. Sometimes I dismiss it, accepting that he's a sheltered son who doesn't know the world, but the feeling of discomfort doesn't easily go away. At one point, I thought about reconsidering marriage, but since we've only met 3 times, it seemed too hasty to decide on a separation. So I decided to wait and see how things would unfold. Since then, we have continued dating. Harry does show some immaturity at times, but he is essentially an honest person. He no longer exhibits the unnatural behavior he showed before. No one is perfect from the start. If you have patience and gradually find harmony, love will eventually grow, said an older female celebrity on a show I watched for distraction. I found some truth in those words. The following week, we went to a famous hotel buffet for our 5th date. Strangely, Harry piled 3 or 4 servings of food onto his plate. Are you sure it's okay to take so much? It would be a waste if you can't finish it, I lightly commented. To which he suddenly burst into laughter, leaving me wondering what was so funny. He said, "A waste, Maya? Are you still talking like someone poor? It's okay to take this much. It doesn't matter if I throw it away if I can't eat it all." I made a sour face. He completely failed to understand that wasting food not only incurs costs, but also affects other customers. The issue isn't just about money, it's about resources and the environment. Aren't you aware of the concept of food waste? It's also inconsiderate to other customers, and eating disorderly isn't good, I said, my voice more stern than usual. In response, Harry suddenly shrank back, poking at his pasta with a fork. He muttered, "I'm sorry, please don't be angry. My mommy said you might be marrying me for money, and I just reacted without thinking." The word *mommy* lingered in my ears, and I couldn't help but repeat it in disbelief. Referring to his mother as *mommy* at his age struck me as strange, revealing something peculiar about his family environment. As the date neared its end, still uneasy with the situation, Harry drove me home. Just as I was getting out of the car, he grabbed my hand to stop me. "Miss Scott, even though I am who I am, would you marry me? Even if not right away, being engaged is fine. As your fiancé, I can wait as long as it takes." I was taken aback by Harry's sudden forwardness, but soon I began to feel genuine joy from his proposal. Despite the many concerning aspects about Harry, his courtship brought me happiness. I believed that some of his shortcomings could be improved upon after marriage, that I could nurture him into a loving husband. 3 months had passed since we met, and I felt it was time to move forward. Let's grow together by complementing each other. We both have flaws and differences, so let's talk a lot and resolve them, I said, teary-eyed and moved by emotion. However, the moment I agreed to the proposal, Harry exhibited problematic behavior once again. "Let's start preparing for married life. First, you should quit your job, take care of the home, and learn housework from my mommy," he said with a smile. My joy vanished, replaced by rising anger. I responded more sharply than usual, "Don't be so presumptuous. If that's your attitude, then marriage is out of the question. Goodbye." Harry was silent, stunned by my reaction. I got out of the car and immediately went back inside my house. Though I had decided to distance myself, I reluctantly agreed to meet him again after receiving a message from Harry over the weekend, insisting on seeing me. The weekend came quickly, and when the appointed day arrived, Harry was already waiting at our meeting place. As I approached, he stood up quickly and apologized deeply. "I'm really sorry about last time. My friends told me to lay down the law, and I took it seriously. They even scolded me for actually thinking it was okay to do that," Harry said, his energy low. His apology began to dissolve my anger. Just a short while ago, I felt like clicking my tongue at him in frustration, but ultimately, I came to terms with it. It's somewhat disappointing, but Harry is dear to me. He is very straightforward, and sometimes it's hard for him to distinguish between jokes and seriousness. He is easily influenced and somewhat indecisive, but I reminded myself that no one is perfect from the start. "Make sure you keep this in mind. We're getting engaged after all," I said with a wry smile. At those words, Harry looked up suddenly and brightened immediately. After a stormy engagement period, a month had passed, and finally, it was time to formally meet each other's families to announce our marriage. The first visit was to Harry's family home. Although I had a long association with President Smith, it had been strictly professional, and this was my first time visiting his home, which made me nervous. Harry was as gentle and lovely as usual, but he seemed a bit off that morning. I thought he might be nervous, but apparently that wasn't the case. About my mom," he started, and I braced myself, thinking of potential issues between a daughter-in-law and mother-in-law. However, I believed in his mother, known to be a hard-working woman and the kind-hearted wife of President Smith. I hoped that if I spoke sincerely, she would understand, but I was mistaken. Yikes! The moment I stepped into the room where we were supposed to greet each other, liquid splashed onto my face. My eyes stung intensely, and a strong irritation hit my nose, causing me to cough violently. I immediately panicked. "How about that, you poor thing? I got rid of the poor smell for you, so be thankful," I heard a mocking voice say. I was stunned by the bitter taste, smell, and heat. I realized the liquid in my mouth was champagne, but I couldn't understand why I'd received such treatment. "Grace, what are you doing?" President Smith exclaimed in shock. The situation became clear. Harry's mother, my future mother-in-law, Grace, had thrown the champagne in my face. The mocking voice was hers as well. I recalled how Harry had previously looked down on me as poor, and I realized that this attitude might have come from Grace. "Ha ha ha, what's the matter, Maya? You're all wet. Funny, isn't it? Go, mommy, typical of you." Harry laughed loudly. At that moment, I realized everything up to this point had been in vain. Only emptiness filled my heart. "I will therefore terminate our contract with your company," I stated firmly. "What?" At my statement, Harry and Grace both exclaimed in surprise. They hurriedly glanced at each other, whispering, perhaps discussing business or something else. I was not involved, merely left to speculate. In that moment, one person remained silent, President Smith. He stood there, pale and wide-eyed. I turned to him once again, thanked him, and began to speak. "First of all, President Smith, I would like to thank you for your cooperation so far. It must be due to the condition we agreed upon that such an incident did not occur before." I turned to speak to Grace and Harry. Grace shot a doubtful look at President Smith and then stared at me sternly. Meanwhile, Harry watched his mother's reaction, then looked back at me. I continued quietly. "This may be an unexpected statement for them, but I hope they listen carefully. One condition of accepting the matchmaking was that I would not reveal. I am the president of a company, though I kept this information hidden until the decision about the May marriage was finalized. I thought my title might get in the way. My connection with President Smith was built through significant business transactions I've managed over the years. When the moment came, I handed over my business card, which naturally listed my company name and position. "Hello again, Mrs. Grace. Thank you for all your help so far," I said. "This is my position. I have been working with your husband's company for over 10 years. Currently, my company is likely your biggest client. I wonder what percentage of your company's sales we represent." As Harry glanced at the card, his face turned pale with surprise. He had worked in his father's company, and seeing my company name should have immediately made it clear who I was. I wasn't just any business owner, I was one of his father's most important business partners. Therefore, I had kept my profession hidden initially to assess Harry's character without my title influencing his behavior. I wanted to see the real person, not just superficial politeness. I couldn't afford to engage with someone whose attitude was contrived, as it could affect not only my personal life, but also his father's company's fate. So I was introduced as someone who simply met Harry through work. I even wore fake glasses and altered my makeup and hairstyle for our dates as part of the disguise. In hindsight, it was all a waste of time. "I'm sorry, President Smith, but I must decline this proposal," I said clearly. "This concerns both marriage and business. We need to pause our transactions to reassess the situation." After I said this, I sat down to face President Smith. I explained the situation as calmly as possible. His face paled and he stuttered, "The transactions are affected? That can't be right." His reaction, however, seemed forced. I shook my head firmly, indicating my decision was final. But I wanted him to understand that my choice wasn't based on fleeting emotions. "President Smith, you mentioned you plan to retire soon and hand over your responsibilities to your son. Given the circumstances, it's only logical to reconsider how trustworthy a future business partner can be. Perhaps there was an intention to secure our relationship through your son marrying me, but unfortunately, that plan has backfired. After graduating from university, I started my own company with friends, and it has been over 20 years since then. I've led the business as its president, and over the past decade, I built a strong relationship with President Smith's company. My company, managed from a female perspective, has been recognized for its unique approach and has seen significant growth recently. As a result, our transactions with President Smith's company have also increased. However, there have been internal discussions about whether to switch to new business partners. Amidst all this, the sudden proposal for an arranged marriage arose. Considering the timing, President Smith might have sensed some movement from our company. This wasn't exactly kept secret. Grace and Harry, now aware of who I am, were clearly disturbed. I decided to explain the situation further. "In fact, we've been reviewing whether to continue our transactions with your company. I've heard that your company is currently facing some management difficulties. Are you aware of that?" I asked. Grace, shocked, frantically shook President Smith's arm beside her. "What does that mean?" she asked, wide-eyed. President Smith, wiping sweat from his brow, looked anxious. It seemed the company's issues hadn't been discussed within the family. Harry, glancing between me and his father, caught my attention. Despite being an insider, he seemed unaware of the current state of his own company. The situation became even more puzzling as I observed their reactions. I continued the conversation, saying, "In light of this, President Smith strongly suggested that I meet up with you, Harry, which has led us to this point. Perhaps you considered this marriage proposal with the stability of your company in mind. It seems you wish to maintain our business relationship at all costs." Grace was visibly shaken. Her hands trembled, and her lips quivered as I explained. President Smith's company is indeed struggling with management issues. "Grace, you may have looked down on me earlier, but your company is facing far more significant problems. Once praised for its quality and speed, President Smith's products have been technologically overtaken by competitors, no longer offering anything special. Moreover," I continued, "the development and manufacturing processes are inefficient, cost reductions have stalled, and product prices have become expensive. Additionally, the company imposes unacceptable levels of pressure on employees, according to modern labor standards. Shortening delivery times has only further deteriorated the corporate reputation." I could see Grace's face fall as I explained the situation. Adopting products from a low-rated company can cause a domino effect, dragging down the reputation of business partners. Even a company with a long history faces challenges with outdated structures and a high turnover rate among young employees. As a result, President Smith's company's market share has gradually decreased and its performance continues to decline. Under such circumstances, it was natural for us to explore transactions with more stable companies. Grace, enraged, suddenly shouted, "How dare you threaten to cut off business based on personal feelings? What a despicable act! Are you blackmailing us? This is the worst. Don't think such behavior is acceptable." Despite her actions being the cause of the situation, I was surprised by her accusatory tone. The lack of an apology spoke volumes about her character. Before I could respond, President Smith shouted vehemently, "Silence! This is all your fault." I swallowed my words, realizing that President Smith, not I, was the one most damaged by this situation. The unexpected fallout from his wife's inappropriate behavior must have been unforeseen for him, as he had hoped for stability. All of this stems from his adherence to our agreement. However, in reality, keeping the secret from Harry alone would have been sufficient. He should have informed his wife beforehand. As a result, I am relieved that I don't have to welcome such a problematic person as my mother-in-law. The sight of Harry was pitiful, pale and trembling, tightly gripping Grace's hand. It was sad to see a 48-year-old man still needing his mother's hand. Seeing him in that state, I couldn't help but give him a cold look. "It's impossible that you, carrying such a cheap-looking bag, could be a president," Harry exclaimed. "Moreover, you complained about food waste and acted like you were poor. You're lying, even about being my father's business partner. How disgraceful!" Harry's accusations seemed like a desperate attempt to blame me, but he is mistaken. I am not interested in branded goods and prefer to use high-quality domestic leather products. Also, my criticism of wasting a large amount of ordered food was not because I am poor, but simply because it is inappropriate behavior. There can be no pretense in this. Regarding the bag, it is custom-made from a workshop I frequent. Anyone knowledgeable would recognize its quality immediately, but it seems none of you are interested in the quality of leather. "This bag is priced higher than most commercial brands," I explained. Grace suddenly stared at my shoes and bag with astonishment, then quickly averted her gaze, clearly embarrassed. "It's a matter of those who know, understand," I continued. "Furthermore, ordering a large amount of food and not being able to finish it is not only wasteful but also disrespectful to the restaurant. It is unreasonable and inappropriate behavior. Moreover, the fact that I am your father's business partner is true. What would it mean if the presidents of companies doing business with each other didn't know one another?" Harry seemed dissatisfied and unconvinced by this explanation. President Smith frowned at his son's behavior. When we confirmed that we knew each other, Harry looked down without a word. His clinging to Grace appeared extremely childish and out of place for his age. Faced with his immaturity, I couldn't help feeling how disappointed I was. "If your company abandons us, we will be on the brink of bankruptcy. Please forgive us." President Smith began to apologize profusely. This clear statement seemed to finally make Grace realize the gravity of the situation. Harry, realizing his actions, turned pale and began to tremble. "Mommy," he said, with tears in his eyes, clinging to Grace in distress. However, Grace was unable to respond in any way. Witnessing this scene, I breathed a deep sigh of relief from the bottom of my heart. I deeply regretted ever considering sharing my life with such a person. Thinking that, because he was honest, I could correct him and make things better now seems like a naive thought in retrospect. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." President Smith repeated his apologies over and over, without actually proposing how to address the situation or make them reflect on their actions. This could easily lead to severing ties on an emotional basis. Therefore, I was forced to make specific remarks about the engagement. "Let's address our engagement. I cannot consider marrying someone whose mother behaves so rudely. Moreover, he did not try to stop her and even laughed along with her. I hope you understand why the engagement should be called off. President Smith listened, repeating words of affirmation as I continued the conversation. Thank you for understanding. Until yesterday, I believed in Harry's potential for improvement and proceeded with the engagement. But now, I feel relieved that our relationship has been dissolved. Furthermore, I provided specific examples of Harry's behavior, such as his frequent quoting of his mother's opinions, saying, "Mommy said so," and his behavior of calling her *mommy* at nearly 50 years of age. He often uses his mother's opinions as a shield to justify his improper behavior. However, his weakness becomes apparent as soon as I point out these issues. He quickly becomes disheartened. There were countless examples of these behaviors. President Smith was astonished, his mouth agape. Grace, too, showed embarrassment. However, Harry himself seemed not to understand what part of his behavior was problematic. Regarding calling off the engagement, is there any fault on my part? I asked. President Smith shook his head almost imperceptibly, his actions seeming pitiful. I paused to calm myself and took a deep breath. I will divorce my wife. Harry will also have to move out with her. The company's operations will be taken over by competent staff, so please do not abandon us. Help us, President Smith said. It appeared that my deep breath had made him anxious, and he suddenly began to declare his intention to divorce Grace. What? That's not possible. I can't manage my life without this marriage. Grace cried out in shock. After that, both Harry and Grace raised their voices at President Smith. Why didn't you tell us beforehand? I am innocent. Why am I being kicked out? The problem is only with Mommy. I'm not involved, Harry protested. Their simultaneous outbursts stirred up the room. Becoming fed up with everything, I finally let out a real sigh. Well, as you wish. Thank you for your time. I will take my leave now, I said to President Smith and quickly left. I needed to go home and take my high-quality clothes to the dry cleaners right away. Otherwise, the champagne stains would set and render them unwearable. Harry stopped his protest and wept, seemingly accepting the situation. Grace tried to retort, but was silenced by a stern reprimand from President Smith. However, she still appeared to grit her teeth in dissatisfaction, looking far more determined than her son. 5 months after the unpleasant incident with the 3 members of the Smith family, as predicted, President Smith resigned from his position. It was not just a retirement but a resignation, taking responsibility for the deteriorating performance of the company. The main reason for the decline in performance was the termination of the contract with my company. A former subordinate, who took over as the new president, conducted a comprehensive review of the operations. Breaking away from family management was well received and external evaluations improved. He was proactive in developing new products, and the results were beginning to show. At this rate, resuming the interrupted transactions might be imminent. Furthermore, President Smith and Grace officially divorced. Harry moved out with Grace as anticipated, and they started a new life together. However, rumors persist of daily conflicts between them. The once close relationship between mother and son may have been based primarily on financial comfort. After being expelled from his father's company, Harry quickly fell into unemployment. Unable to bear Harry's financial dependence, Grace left him in President Smith's care and disappeared herself. I heard that she now lives alone in an old, low-rent apartment, mourning her fate. Grace, who once boasted of her lavish lifestyle, seems to have pushed many people away with her behavior. Now, she has neither helpers nor friends and has become a lonely figure. About a year after President Smith's retirement, I had a chance encounter with the former president when I visited his old company. I unexpectedly ran into him. I am very sorry for the great inconvenience I caused before, former President Smith said. he explained that he had generously transferred half of his property to Grace. However, the main reasons for her financial troubles were Harry's demands and Grace's continued extravagant spending. Unfortunately, this is nothing but personal responsibility, and sympathy is hard to come by. Former President Smith initially planned to keep Harry at a distance. However, he was shocked to learn that his nearly 50-year-old son didn't even know how to boil water. Eventually, they ended up living together. He seems to be firmly educating Harry now, making various decisions within the household since Harry had completely depended on Grace. I feel that I have not properly looked after my son and wife until now. This is the misfortune I created for myself. Although it's late, I am deeply reflecting. I think I also did some wrong things to Grace. Fortunately, the company did not go bankrupt, and I am relieved, said the retired President Smith. Now staying at home, he is seriously engaging with Harry for the first time. Harry, facing unprecedented challenges with household chores and part-time jobs, despite his age, seems to frequently cry. I can only hope that he becomes a decent person. However, I do not wish to have any more dealings with him ever again. 3 years have passed since then, and my company is doing very well. My performance has improved compared to before, and the stock price has also risen. Regarding my personal situation, I am no longer considering marriage. I had already informed my parents when I got engaged and explained everything thoroughly when the engagement was dissolved. When I shared the details, they supported my decision to stay single rather than approving my involvement with such a person. As a result, my parents have become even stronger supporters of my dedication to my work. I work actively every day and have taken up new hobbies to lead a more fulfilling life. Although I previously preferred indoor activities, I decided to start exercising at the gym. Recently, I can visibly see muscles starting to form. My subordinates look at me with admiration, which is quite a ticklish feeling. I've always believed that happiness is something you grab for yourself. I seek happiness that I create on my own, not just the kind that comes from being with someone else. If I were to fall in love again in life, I would prefer it to be towards the end of my life. At life's end, I feel one can afford to throw everything away for love. However, that's not a concern for now. Currently, my days are fulfilling and I am happy. My life has just begun, and I continue to strive towards a bright future.